Good afternoon and welcome to the Austrian residence. On behalf of my wife Eva and myself, we welcome you all celebrating the Austrian-Canadian Council's 30th anniversary. I won't hold a long speech, but I think there are some things that has to be said right away before I hand over the floor to the president, to your president. First of all, I want to thank the colleagues of the Austrian-Canadian Council and also Roland for choosing the Austrian residents to celebrate this important anniversary, 30 years of intense work together with the embassy. Thank you very much for this honor, and I understand that some of you haven't been to the residence for many, many years. I promise, my wife and I will promise that will change. You will be invited very often to this place, and I hope we will all also have such a lovely weather than today. So first of all, thank you very much for choosing this place, and thank you very much to you all for coming and joining us here to celebrate this anniversary. And as an ambassador of Austria, and on behalf of all my predecessors in the past 30 years, and one of my predecessors is here, Otto, I want to extend my gratefulness and thankfulness for all the wonderful work you have done within the Austrian-Canadian Council to establish Austria, to raise the visibility of Austria and of Austrians here in Canada. So thank you very, very much. It comes from the deep of my heart. I think you've done you are the best you were, and you are still, and you will be the best ambassadors of our country. So thank you very much, and this requires an applause to you all.
First of all, Your Excellencies, werte Frau Botschafter, distinguished guests, first I really would like to thank you for holding the 30th anniversary for the Austrian-Canadian Council. It was really nice that you stepped forward and said, I'll do it. That's great. Thank you very much. Because I know it was a lot of work. Sorry, I've made a long list and several of our VIPs are still missing in action. So I just will welcome as first our former ambassador, Dr. Otto Dietz, who has done so much for us, and I thank him for being here in Canada and becoming another Austrian immigrant. That's so great. And we also have another retired ambassador, Frau Friederike Gregory on the back there. She's a Canadian ambassador. She was in Denmark. And then we have Felipe Diniz here on the side, the retired operating officer from the Bank of Canada, and his lovely wife Susan Cox from External Affairs. Welcome. In the front we have a new friend that I'm so delighted to have met, and this is Puerstl, the former executive board member for Magna International in Canada. Thank you, Horst, for coming. Then, right behind you there, we have Dr. Daniela Zinsmeister, a biologist that studies bird migration. I'm glad she doesn't, I would say, track us, what we are doing. Yes, then I'd like to thank Julian Armour and his great musicians for doing the afternoon for us, for playing for us, and we are grateful. Thank you very much. And we're looking forward. But now I would like to express a really warm welcome to our friends from Edmonton, from the Wirth Institute, the former, the first actually director, Dr. Franz Sabo, who has done so much for us. He was the first director of the foundation program. He helped establish the Wirth Institute, and he did so much for us, and he put us on the right track, and we are, thanks to him, what we are today. Beside him is Dr. Professor Josef Batruc, who has been the second director who replaced Dr. Sabo and I'd like to thank them for decades-long service and support to our cause. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was really a pleasure. And now we have from Kitchener, right here in the front, President Dietmar Biselli is the president of the Alpine Club, Kitchener-Waterloo, and right beside him, his lovely wife, Sonia Biselli. And both of them, I'm so grateful that they were part right from day one when our Austrian-Canadian Council was established in Toronto in February 1995. Thank you. Now we have here in the shade, and lucky for her, President Ursula Hoffmann from the Continental Austrian Club in Burlington. I was just there 2 weeks ago when they fired 60 years the Austrian Club's birthday. And right beside her is her husband, Peter Hoffmann, who is also an executive member of the club. Also from Burlington, Maria Baxan, the past president of the Continental Austrian Club. I don't know where she's in the back there. Then we have Andreas Rendl from the Austria Vancouver Club with his wife Esmeralda, right here, sorry. Eva Hergovich, from a past president from the Burgenländer Club in Toronto. And last but not least, we have Willi Platzer, past president from the Alpensingers Toronto, and his lovely wife, Boldi, and his daughter, Ursula Ivanovsky, a singer. I did not know that she is going to show, that's why it's not on here. We have Monika Schirivan, the president of the president from the Austrian side in Montreal here. Yeah, that's right, thank you. And from our board of directors, we have past president Inga Michalek and husband René Wolfram. And we have Christine Welling and her husband Fred. And now we'd like to thank the Austrian embassy team for doing this fantastic job for the setup. We also like to thank Willi Puerstl for filming, as the filmmaker, Willi Puerstl for filming this great event of ours. And for Sam Garcia for taking the pictures. And I just saw a very good friend of Austria coming in, our cardiologist, Dr. Fraser Rubins. Welcome, Fraser. I also would like to thank Joanne McGuire for producing today's program. And I really hope I haven't forgotten anyone, because that can just happen. The ACC was created when His Excellency Dr. Walter Lichem, the then Austrian ambassador, approached me in 1994 that we Austrian immigrants in Canada should create a national organization. No one would have anticipated the positive response it received from Austrian compatriots across the country. They volunteered and made this organization what it is today. I would like to thank them profoundly for their tireless effort and support they gave us all those years. A big thank you to those that took part in the inaugural meeting in Toronto, which, by the way, was opened by our Federal Chancellor, Dr. Franz Banitsky. In addition, the Austrian Canadian Council has become an umbrella organization for support to the 25 Austrian clubs across the country. In 1998, the ACC, together with the Austrian Embassy and the Worth Institute, created a magazine we called the OE Culture Magazine, and to inform Canadian readers on Austrian academic and cultural matters and on the contribution of prominent Austrians to our Canadian society. A great thank you goes out to the Wirth family, because it was Dr. Manfred Wirth in December of 1999 who started the ball rolling, when he donated to the ACC a $1.3 million endowment fund, which was earmarked for our Austrian chair at the University of Alberta. I would like to thank all those that were part in still running the Austrian chair, now called the Wirth Institute. It's truly a pleasure to see how the chair has flourished. The ACC continues to support many cultural educational endeavors, showcasing Austrian culture and Austrian know-how. Now I would like to thank all those that continually have sent donations. This is why we are still here today. We have produced a small program for you. Please read it, and it gives you a short overview of the projects that we had undertaken. Thank you very much, and enjoy the afternoon.
For this short concert, I'm delighted and honored to be joined by 8 of Canada's absolutely finest musicians. So the man who just dropped his music is Mark Jokic, one of Canada's wonderful violinists. Not so skilled with his pages today, but he's actually come from Montreal. He's concert master of l'Orchestre Classique de Montréal, so he came up to join us, and he plays regularly at Music and Beyond. I've known him since he was a kid. We've been playing together for a long time. He's joined by Mathieu Deveau, also he's from Ottawa, actually living in Montreal now. Brenna Hardy-Kavanaugh is our violist. John Geggy, one of Ottawa's most versatile musicians. He's a wonderful classical player and a wonderful jazz player too, so thank you, John. And speaking of versatility, it's hard to top our keyboardist, Matthew Larkin, who's a fabulous organist, wonderful pianist, plays harpsichord, conducts choirs, writes music. What don't you do? I don't know. I'm not sure. And Lara Deutsch, a wonderful young Canadian flute player. And if you're wondering, is that flute made of gold? Yes, it is. And it's on loan to her from the Canamex Corporation. Yes. And Victor Herbier, covering all of the other wind parts, because we've got a smaller group, not a full orchestra. We couldn't fit the Vienna Philharmonic on this stage, so we put together. But Victor is also a wonderful composer. Thank you, Victor, for joining us. And Zach Pulak on percussion. So plays in most things, and he'll be joining us too on our opening on July 4th, which is all Viennese and Austrian repertoire with the wonderful Canadian soprano Karina Gauvin. So definitely a celebration to be had, and we are deeply honored that Ambassador Rendl is serving as patron of this event. So one to look forward to. And thank you for that. And now let's take you back in time, not far from the Blue Danube Waltz. 1866 was a dark time in Vienna. The Austrians had sadly just lost a war with the Prussians, and Vienna was a dark place, all shut down, all the balls were closed down. And it kind of reminds me of the pandemic, because the artists of Vienna were all out of work and in really bad shape. And it was put on the shoulder of Johann Strauss Jr. and his 2 brothers to raise the spirits of Vienna in 1867. Again, a familiar year already from Blue Danube Waltz. And so they put on a number of balls to cheer people up, and he wrote for that what I think is one of his absolute greatest works. He wrote like 400 works at least. He was incredibly prolific and fantastic stuff. But the artist waltz is dedicated to the artists of Vienna of the time and raised some funds for them. And it's a little like the pandemic, where we saw so many of our Canadian artists totally out of work. Many had to sell their houses, their instruments, but now we're on to happier times. So enjoy The Artist's Life by Johann Strauss Jr.
Hola,